The A-League season has come to a close, but the transfer season has only just begun. We thought we'd take a look at some of the highlight moves in and out of Australia over the past few weeks and take stock of where a couple of clubs are at in the first couple of weeks of the off-season. Jacob, the one that probably caught most people, including us and definitely a lot of Central Coast Mariners fans by surprise, is Brian Calteac off to the Perth Glory. Now, Calteac had been rumoured all season to be leaving the Mariners and probably going overseas into Asia, and India was the tip that we kept hearing over and over again. And the Mariners' release statement when he was announced to be leaving the club even said, he had a desire to move overseas. Obviously, Perth is a long way away. It doesn't quite cross any seas depending on the route you fly. But this was a big swing, and it obviously caps off a lot of early moves from Perth in this window as well. We've got the likes of Sutton and Wooden from the Phoenix, which have also been rumoured to have been done for a little while now, and Mark Birighitti back into the A-League as well. So all of a sudden, you're adding 4 really quality, experienced A-League players into your defensive stocks, which for a team like Perth Glory that have conceded an amazing amount of goals last campaign, there's some really big boosts.
Yeah, I think it's a good job by Stan Lazaridis to identify okay, the defence has been the big issue for us, and we need to do some work to make sure that we can address that. And signing proven A-League players, I think, is always a good start. It's a good you're not taking a gamble on an overseas player, a foreign player who takes up a visa spot. You're probably going to have to offer them a 2 or 3 year contract. So if they don't work out, you're stuck with them for a little bit. Like it's the smart move is to take those who you've seen around the league for a little while, and the sort of their floor, what you can expect from them at the bare minimum. So that pairing of Sutton and Wootton for the Phoenix, obviously they were exceptional last campaign with Wellington, and now they've got a chance to obviously head out west and do it with Perth and Calteac. Yeah, the funny thing with that desire to move overseas comment is that you can have a desire to move overseas, but if you're not getting any offers, then you might just have to settle for heading over a sea of sand, I suppose, out to Perth. Look, he's a player that's got he's got a very, very good level that he can play at, and we did see it sort of take a little bit of time at the start of this season for him to get into the groove of things. He was making quite a few mistakes, especially in that Asian campaign this year. The Mariners struggled to find his feet early on, but I think that towards the back end of the season we started to see a little bit more of what we came to expect from him last season, and I think for Perth that's a good sign, is that okay, it wasn't like he's just come off of a really bad season the whole way across. He still had those games and those moments where he was a very, very elite centre back, and in a league that's really been struggling for quality in defence for the last couple of seasons. It's to get somebody in who can put in a stint. That's a really big get for Perth. So look, it's a shame for the Mariners because it feels like things are kind of almost falling apart for them at the moment. The wheels are falling off. Players leaving the club left, right and centre, and very little left of those championship winning squads now. So a lot of work for them to do, and probably in a very much in a rebuild stage at this point in time now, which is going to be interesting to see how Mark Jackson handles that as a coach. Sort of would be the first time he's going through it. So look, Perth, fantastic signings. Maybe a question mark over Birighitti. He's been out of the league for a little while, played some NPL football out in Perth. Doesn't have the most amazing record at that level. So maybe it's a bit of a gamble and just a hope that... Because look, goalkeepers, like defenders last season, across the board were pretty capable of mistakes and having bad games. If you can get in somebody who's a veteran, just give them a chance and just see. Ollie Sale was much maligned throughout the season. I think, didn't have the best of times. And then there were games where he played quite well, but it was just little mistakes or things that let the team down, or they couldn't score up the other end of the pitch or whatever. So, if you can get Birighitti in and he's at least maybe a little bit more consistent, I think it's worth a gamble for Perth. But yeah, it seems like, they're really starting out hot. I kind of remember that they're almost being precursors to this in January with Perth. They were one of the clubs who were really active in that window window, and all of the sort of communication and messaging around it has been that, you know, the owners, the club, the football management, they're all acutely aware of the situation the club is in terms of its on-field product and what it needs to do to get it to a level where they can compete for finals football again. So I think we're sort of seeing the fruition of those plans that have been laid in place now for, well, since Ross Pelligra came in almost. So, you know, it's been 18 months since he came in. Is that right?
When was it? I feel like it was... Yeah, no, that sounds about right, because it was the middle of the season before, roughly.
Yeah. I feel, so
towards the end, maybe,
you know, it's you know, it's pretty clear they've had these plans in place and now they're able to sort of act on it, and that's why they're one of the first clubs that we're seeing making these moves, is because they're like, right, now's go time. We've been planning this. Let's do it.
They have to. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, no, I think it's a good sign of intent. You know, obviously, whether it pays off or not, it's all speculation at this point in time. But we've seen the level these players can play at. And if they're playing at their best, there's no reason why Perth can't have a much improved season next time out.
This is a rogue shout. I did put this on social media, so I'm already on record with this, with a very early prediction for the next A-League season. Perth Glory could be a top 4 side. That's gonna sound ridiculous, I know, but you just look at the defensive solidity of teams that have been very successful in the A-League the last few years. You look at the likes of Auckland FC this year. You look at the likes of Wellington Phoenix and the Mariners last year, and Melbourne Victory at times in the past few seasons, especially that one last season under Popovich. Defense does win championships. You know, just look at Sydney FC and the frailties they had and conceding so many goals despite being a really good attacking output team, same as Adelaide United as well. If you have a good defense, you're going to find yourself towards the top of the league fighting for finals positions. And they have potentially the best Australian striker on his day in Adam Taggart. When you're getting the service, when you're fit and firing, he's probably still the number one. Obviously, you have to consistently prove that to be considered there. But given the quality that he's had around him, that's probably, you know, he's allowed to have an off year in terms of his numbers. So I think you get a couple of signings right. You still got Luke Amos, who was really good towards the end of the season. If you just get a couple more of those midfield final third signings, it's a situation where the quality you extract is going to be more than the sum of the parts in this situation, because you have the likes of Adam Taggart at the end to finish all these balls off from these quality players. So I'm optimistic about the Perth Glory. I know we all were last year as well. David Zurilic is going to be slept on because he's had such a bad season, but you can't forget the pedigree that he has around with the Red Bull system and all of the training he's done as assistants around the world. So again, I'm high on Perth. Very, very early shout, but we'll see what happens there. And then on the Mariners, as you say, there's been lots of really worrying reports coming out of that club. There have been rumours of a transfer freeze from Charlesworth just because of the financial situation the club is in. There's also rumours about QPR potentially sending people in to have a look at the club from an ownership perspective and seeing whether it's worth taking them over. There's absolutely nothing concrete, as I understand it, on that just yet. But that's a really worrying situation. And to lose Brian Calteac on top of all the players that they've lost in the last few years, championship, cut the squad, championship again, cut the squad even more. And then the final remnants of that would being Brian Calteac. I'm pretty sure Mikhail Docker was the only player they've managed to re-sign after last year's championship in terms of that core group. So he's still got a 2-year deal left to go and won the best and fairest and probably will again next year unless they bring in someone else quality. So they're in a lot of trouble. So hopefully better times ahead for the Mariners, especially if an ownership deal can be made. Let's head over to Adelaide United, because obviously the big story then, I can't remember if we actually confirmed this was happening or not, but Craig Goodwin is returning home to Adelaide United on the podcast. I'm not sure if we've said that. I know we talked about the rumours, but after 2 years away with Al Wahda in the Saudi Pro League, playing against the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo and Neymar when he played that one game that one time, maybe. I don't know. They spent a lot of money on him for not much output, but obviously all those stars, he's come back to the A-League, which is really cool. I think a lot of people were hoping this is what the storyline would play out to be. And obviously, he's probably going to have to put a C on his shirt as well, because there's going to be a couple of good wins running around.
Yeah, well, yeah. did both put the initial on for fairness? Does only one of them do it? In which case, you'd say it would be Archie.
Probably has to be Archie,
yeah. Craig's a legend here, so he gets preferential treatment in that regard. But no, it's kind of a lot of people have joked about it. Oh, imagine if Craig had stayed, would have been 2 Goodwins this season. Well, we're getting it next season anyway. So, and honestly, it's an extremely exciting prospect of having the pair of them in a front three, and really that left wing role was the one that was kind of a black hole for most of the season for Adelaide as well. So having Craig Goodwin coming back in locks that up, and suddenly they become an even scarier attacking unit. So considering how many goals they've scored over the last few seasons, that's a crazy prospect to think about. And yes, okay, Goodwin's obviously he's a couple of years older now, and has time caught up with him, but his play style has never really been super reliant on pace or anything like that. It's his technique, his ability to strike a ball and things like that have always put him a cut above the rest. So that's something that doesn't necessarily always go as quickly with age. We've seen Stajcic still playing tremendously at 36, 37 years of age this season. So it's something that there's definitely a feeling that Goodwin can keep producing at a decent level for at least 2 or 3 years, and he signed a 3-year contract. So it seems like he's always wanted to retire with Adelaide, and it's pretty clear Adelaide's his home. So it's nice to finally have him back, and sort of I'd like to think it signals the end of maybe some of this weirdness around contract situations with players at the club, where we saw obviously it happened with Goodwin. We've seen it happen with Ibasuki as well, where it's players want to stay, but then the club either can't match what's expected or refuse to budge in their position, and so they have to take up another opportunity. With Goodwin obviously going overseas, I'm presuming money had at least a little bit to do with that decision, considering how much money would be on offer in the Saudi Pro League. But with Ibasuki, it was the contract length and being able to get an extra year on the contract, which Adelaide wouldn't budge on. So hopefully it sort of signals the end of that, and still this willingness to have South Australian players coming to the club and representing the club. And it's something that obviously Carl Viet, when he departed, he said he really hopes the club continues with. It's something that they've really championed under his stewardship, and now Etan Andrioli's coming in, and he's kind of saying the same sort of stuff. He wants it to be a South Australian club. So to get Craig Goodwin back, he's one of the many in the pantheon of Adelaide United greats, and it's for the most part all of them either now or at least in the past called South Australia properly their home. So it's just awesome to have him back, and there's high expectations now, I think, heading into next season. Like as long as those defensive issues can be addressed, whether it is signings or whether it is just the case of a new coach comes in, some new ideas and things are tightened up. But getting Craig Goodwin back in, people are already talking about, I can't wait to see him whipping the ball in and Archie getting on the end of it and things like that. So, hopes are high for what's, hopefully going to be a productive partnership, and it could be huge for Archie's development as well. Obviously, he had a fantastic season, really the first season where he stayed fit for the majority of it in his career. This is a chance now to play with Socceroo World Cup player, who's played overseas,
goal scorer against France,
played in Europe, goal scorer against France, a really, really, really high quality player. To be able to build a partnership with him and learn a few things from him, I think it could be huge. So it's a really exciting time in Adelaide.
Now, we've heard you and Tonus as well, when he comes on the show, fly the SA Great Flag a lot. I just wanted to put it in some perspective that I don't even think I had until a couple of weeks ago, when the latest Australian Sports Commission participation survey came out. Now, we've seen the amount of South Australians that come through the gates of Adelaide United and make their mark on the A-League, and then they have a really high portion of players in the Socceroos as well, and the Matildas and national teams doing their thing. And just to know that whatever number you thought it would be, South Australian participation in football represents only 6% of Australia's football participation, which it was always going to be small representative to other states, but I don't think it was going to be that small. I definitely had at least double digits in my head. So to have only 6% of the country's football players, and sometimes as much as 20 to 25% of the players in some national team squads at junior level, that's an extraordinary output from South Australia. So clearly something is being done right in the development pathways in that part of the country. And Craig Goodwin and obviously Nestori Irinkunda. And next season we'll have our eyes on Amlati Tatu as well, as I'm sure he's set to make his mark on the A-League as well. So really cool stuff for Adelaide United. Heading over to the west of Sydney, the Wanderers released their player list of people who were leaving the club, and it include the likes of Antonsen, Clismy, Pelikanos, Taywuk and Harper, but no Juan Mata to be found. Now, I'm assuming as soon as the ink dries on a new deal for Juan and the media publicity around it, you'd want to jump on pretty quickly. So potentially nothing is being determined just yet. But clearly also, Jacob, he hasn't made the instant decision to leave, which is, I guess, an optimistic thing for Wanderers supporters.
Yeah, it seems like there's definitely some form of talks ongoing in terms of, keeping him at the club next year. Otherwise, it would have been easy to just announce that he's left because, well, we're not talking to him. So, it's not going to happen that he'll be coming back. So, look, whether or not that's a good thing for the Wanderers, I mean, he did have a limited impact this season. I think we were all hoping for him to have played a much bigger role in their season. And yes, okay, that he wasn't necessarily fit 100% of the time and things like that, but still, even when he did get minutes, it felt like he wasn't quite up to par with what we'd expected. So it's something that I'm sure the Wanderers, that's something that will be playing into consideration for them, is how much of a role is he going to be able to play next season and moving forwards for this club. But it's also one where we know that on his day, and we did see glimpses of it, he can be such a quality player that you'd be silly not to also consider keeping him around. So it definitely seems like there's some form of talks or discussion going on about what his involvement is going to be next season. And we've read that he's got all sorts of plans for the future of football in this country, Juan Mata, whether it's investing or coaching or whatever it might be for him. So it's pretty clear he likes it here, and he'd love to stay here moving forwards. But it's about that role with the Wanderers. Is he going to be getting minutes next season? Is it worth them keeping him around? Obviously, he's a visa spot. He wouldn't be on any sort of insignificant amount of wages. So with plans to sort of clamp down on that as well moving forwards, that's got to be in consideration for them too. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But it seems like at this point in time that the decision hasn't actually been made and that they're still weighing up their options.
Of course, someone who is staying at the Western Sydney Wanderers is Alen Stajcic, who, above his initial simple 1-year deal at the club, has signed for 2 more years at the Wanderers. I think we can both agree very well deserved. I think most football people around the league will agree from what was a rocky start, and you can measure the success of their season in opposition to the amount of conversation about Juan Mata's place on the bench as well. He turned them around magnificently. I think it was 12 games unbeaten towards the end of the season as well. Obviously, they fell to Melbourne Victory in the elimination final, but particularly seeing the way that the RBB and the Wanderers crowd were kind of reinvigorated. We saw a couple of those away days in New South Wales towards the end of the season as well. The way that club has kind of been brought back to life in the last few months has been really encouraging, and I think kind of a very easy decision to sign him on for another couple of years.
Absolutely. And I think he absolutely smashed it out of the park this season in terms of he was brought in almost as a crisis manager, right? Like, it was a club that was in a little bit of no man's land. Things didn't work out with Marco Rudan in the slightest and kind of blew up there. And, there was a lack of trust from the fans towards the club, and it just felt like they needed somebody to come in, and this is something Stajcic has done throughout his career, has come into clubs in a little bit of a mess and just help tidy things up and tide them over for the meanwhile so they can get back on their feet. And I think that's what they were expecting him to do here, just keep things stable. It doesn't have to necessarily make a lot of noise this season, but just make sure that they don't fail to meet expectations and things like that. And I think that he absolutely smashed it, right? Had them playing really good football. It took a little bit of time to get into it, obviously, and like you said, there was a lot of talk early on with Juan Mata and what role is he going to play? Should he be on the bench? Should he be starting? Should he be this? Should he be that? But once I think they sort of found their feet, it was pretty clear that he'd I'm not going to say he assembled the squad, but he got them playing really good football, very attacking, scoring a lot of goals, which is what we like to see. Towards the back end of the season, they were one of the form sides in the league. So I think it's an absolute no-brainer from the club to offer him that extension. One of those coaches as well who came in and a lot of fans were like, well, we're not expecting too much from him, right? Because it is this case of we just need somebody in. He's got experience in these kind of situations. Let's see how it goes. And, he's been able to take them to the finals again, obviously. Still, however many days it's been since a finals win for the Wanderers, since, 2016 was the last one, with that semi-final win over Brisbane.
Decade now, yep.
It's over a decade. So a long time, but you've got to remember that in those years, in between now and then was a long period of time where they didn't make a lot of finals as well. So, the fact that they're back now, consecutive seasons, making finals, and it seems like this was a step up from last season as well in terms of the football they were playing. I think, like you said, absolute no-brainer.
The other player who's going to be leaving is Nicholas Milanovic, who is the big name that departs the club, who has secured that move to Aberdeen and will also be linking up with former Wanderer Cassina Yankee, who was released by Portsmouth but has signed for Aberdeen for a 3-year deal. So more Aussies in Scotland linking up together, which is pretty cool as well. But Jacob, of course, if people want to keep up to date with not just the latest transfer deals, but with the rumour mill that's been going around in Australian football, they can catch your weekly rumour mill series on the Roundball Australia website as well. Keep up to date with that. There's lots of juicy stuff in there.